grief, I could only feel gratitude. Can we have a little bit less light here and more there? Is that possible? Because I like to see you, that's easier. Oh, lovely, thank you. I feel gratitude for what you've both created in this room, which feels to me like a real spirit of listening. And to you, Jude, for this. Because for me, it's when spirit is unified with purpose that we get powerful peace building. In fact, I would go so far as to say that out of all the hundreds of peace builders that we work with throughout the world, those who have done the inner work that you referred to, those who have investigated their own shadow, had a good look. Oh, you want me in the middle? Oh, okay. Those who have investigated their own darkness and looked at it, those are the ones who can resolve conflict. And I'm sure most of you know this, that we have to self-reflect every day on a regular basis so that we're not projecting our darkness, our unresolved darkness, out onto other people. And I learned this after 4 years of working out how nuclear weapons decisions are made and who makes them. And gradually, painfully, with difficulty, getting some of those who make the decisions, be they nuclear physicists or military or strategists or people who sign the checks or people who build the missiles, to get into a room, in fact, an old Quaker retreat centre not far from Oxford, with their opposite numbers from the other nuclear nations. We're going back to 1986 now, at the height of the Cold War, because they didn't know each other. And I really felt it was important that they not only met their opposite numbers from other nuclear countries, but actually learned to listen to them. And at first, it was not very successful. People arrived very tense, with their jackets on and their ties, and carrying the weight of their responsibility on their shoulders. And my great mentor, who was a Quaker called Adam Curl, the greatest peace builder I've ever met. He was the first professor of peace studies at Bradford University. And I asked him what to do, and he said, well, we might be able to help. The short part of the story is that Adam came with 4 other mediators and meditators and was willing to sit in the library underneath the first floor. It was called the Solar, beautiful beamed room where we held the discussions. That was on the first floor of this manor house. And underneath was this library. And Adam and 4 other people were willing to sit there and meditate solidly for 2.5 days. And at the end of the first day, beginning of the second day, a man from the US State Department came to me and he said, Scilla, this is a very special room, meaning this beamed hall. And I said, yeah, it was built in 1360, it's very special. And he said, no, there's something very special going on in here. And I said, well, you know, Quakers have been gathering here and talking, and people have been doing yoga in this room, and it is very special. He said, no, there's something coming through the floorboards. And I said, well, yeah, you're right. Do you want to know what it is? And he said, yeah. So I told him, and he went white. And I said, well, if you don't believe me, ask those people who serve you your lunch, those older people. It's them. He kind of looked at me like this, and down he went to lunch. And he came back and went. And it was that spirit with our purpose that eventually led to negotiations that were the basis of 2 treaties. And it was being supported by spirit to enable people to reach each other as people, and not as ciphers or titles or other nationalities even. We eventually extended these talks to India and Pakistan, even Israel. And so it was an extraordinary learning experiment and experience. And after doing that for 21 years, I handed it over to other people much better at it than I, because I noticed something happening quite different in the world. And that was that I had a hunch that local people were doing incredible things to stop people killing each other. So I asked a researcher, in fact, one of my daughter's colleagues from Sussex University, after he graduated, and I said, would you like to do some research? And sent him off for a year to find out how many locally led peace initiatives there were that were effective and accountable in the world. And he did it all from his flat in Hackney. We had no money to send him out there, literally. After a year, he'd counted 350 reliable, locally led initiatives in Colombia, in the Congo, in Zimbabwe, Nepal, you name it. And so we started Peace Direct, because none of these initiatives had support. And they needed mainly training. They needed to teach each other what they knew, which we set up, and they also needed media coverage, because that made them safer if they were known. And as a result, from this 350 that we were able to locate in 1999, there are now 1,786 at the last count. And this is what makes me know that as crazy and befuddled as our leaders are today at the top, the real genius, the real energy, the real wisdom is coming from below, just like you said in your story. It's like grass roots coming up, grass shoots coming up through concrete, what you see all over the world if you do the job that we do. And these people's courage is stunning, and it's unreported. So if any of you know good journalists, tell them. I'll give you one example. Gulilai Ismail is a young woman from northwest Pakistan, which is a difficult place to grow up as a woman, and she started getting girls into school when she was 16, along with Malala Yousafzai, who got shot in the head for doing that. Completely undeterred, Gulilai, who is fearless, started training teams of young men and young women to go into the madrasas, the religious schools, identify the young men being trained for jihad, go home with them to their families, and talk with parents about why the Quran would not approve of suicide bombing. And they have so far dissuaded over 200 from carrying out their suicide bombing mission. Now, if that's not conflict prevention, I don't know what is. So that's just one example for you of the inner strength, the combination of spirit and purpose that is now happening all over the world, but the media hasn't noticed. The media doesn't know what's going on. We try to tell them, but mostly they don't listen. But so what I wanted to bring to you today, because it's really a very extraordinary gathering in this room, is just a little bit more of the examples of what we're doing now. I wrote a book 2 years ago called The Business Plan for Peace, because people write business plans for everything, but not for peace. And so I thought we now know enough about why people fight, what it costs when they try to deal with problems by using superior force. Nothing has worked in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria by using overwhelming power. There's still no peace. So I wanted to know what all that costs. And I can tell you, if you want to know, we spend $1,739 billion, that's more noughts than you can imagine, on militarization every year. When $31 billion, like that, compared to like that, would wipe out starvation worldwide. And $11 billion would enable every child in the world to have fresh water. And when I did the sums, what I did was I took 25 initiatives that we know work in the world, scaled them up over 10 years, and added up what it would all cost. And that came to $2 billion. So to shift from a useless and ineffective military approach to conflict, and soldiers are actually very good at preventing war. You might not realize this, but they're so disciplined and so efficient that when you set them on a course of actually preventing war, they're very good at it. They've even 6 NATO nations have got together and written a document called Understand to Prevent. And it's the manual for the military on preventing war. It's brilliant. So we're now working, since this book came out, we've been asked to take a number of the initiatives forward. And one of them is to work with NATO nations to ask each one to develop a conflict prevention budget alongside their defense budget. Because once the money is there, then the soldiers can do what they're very good at, which is preventing war. So that's just one of the things we're doing. Thank you. Another one is what we call architectures for peace. When Nelson Mandela came out of jail in 1989, he knew that there would be civil war very soon if nothing was done, before there could be elections. And so he set up a system of an architecture for peace for the whole country, and a national peace council, city peace councils, town council, village peace council, all comprising people who were trusted by the community to develop a peace plan should conflict break out. And it was so effective that really very few people were killed between 1989 and the elections in 1994. So it worked. Now the same idea has been picked up by Kenya and Ghana, and they've passed legislation for it. So in the business plan for peace, what we're doing is lining up the wherewithal so that 3 other countries prone to conflict can also install an architecture for peace. And you'll never believe how little it costs to systematically prevent war for a whole country. Guess, how much do you think it would cost? Did you say 3 million? 15, no, $2.5 million. Just to start the training and the setting up of a system like that. And then it costs $500,000 to keep the training going year after year, because you have to make it really work. So it just gives you an idea that a minute sum like that can keep a country at peace and prevent conflict escalating. And prevention is the name of the game all the time. We haven't done the research on ameliorating, picking up the debris of war once it's broken up, because lots of people do that. What we're interested in is the cost effectiveness of preventing war. So I'll just give you one last example of how that works, and that is divestment. Anybody here who has either a pension fund or is part of a university that has an endowment fund, please phone them up and ask them what criteria they apply to where they invest your money. Because if it's invested in the production of weapons, you personally are adding to the problem. And you have to move your money and get your pension fund or your endowment fund to do the same. Because then we will cut off the lifeblood of the supply of weapons which fuel war. So, just take a bit of a deep breath and go back to where we started, which is that it's when the inner, and Jude knows this so well, when the inner power meets the outer action, that we're really able to bring about change, every single one of us. And when a lot of young people now feel very desperate, very depressed, very hopeless. And when they ask me that question, what can I do? I say to them, what breaks your heart? And when they tell me, that's where the energy is. It might be refugee children, it might be wounded animals, doesn't matter. That's where the energy is. Second question, what are your skills? And they may say, I love doing social media, or I'm quite good at getting a group of people together, or I can crowdfund, whatever it is. And I say, well, match your skill to what breaks your heart. And I guarantee that within a few weeks, you'll have a group of people around you who agree with you and want to get together with you. And in 2 years, you'll have a viable, active, effective bunch of people really doing something to change our world.